Hi everyone, welcome back to the Mandarin Blueprint Podcast, episode 128. I'm covering for Phil this week. He's having a well-deserved break, going around China somewhere very nice with his missus. So, as usual, we're going to go into emails and comments pretty much straight away. I'm just going to stop saying we've got some awesome comments and emails this week because we kind of have them every week now. Like every week they're just great. I don't want to jinx it or anything, but I'm just going to say now for the emails and comments because they're always just really, really a pleasure to read. So starting off with, hello, you guys ask for input or feedback, and instead of arguing with the grammar nerds in the comment section, I figured it would be better to just write a thank you email. Oh, thank you. I listened to your advice and I read some articles by Krashen and Steve Kaufman. I think you guys are spot on, and I'm insanely happy at the progress I have made in less than 2 months of deciding to learn Mandarin. It's on level 25 right now. I was going to look up exactly how many characters that is, but I don't know off the top of my head. But that's definitely a nice sort of few hundred characters and obviously a few hundred words. And I imagine she's been reading sentences quite comfortably at this point. So you're in phase 4. So you're starting to, by phase 4, starting to read full-length stories, and that going from scratch after 2 months. You know, that's very impressive. She says, I finished one of those Mandarin companion books this weekend, and the intro says it usually takes people a year, an exclamation mark in brackets. Yeah, to get to the point of being able to read it. They have different levels, and of course a year is just average, but if you learn in the traditional way. I didn't know a single word of Chinese before December, and all of this started because I wanted to pronounce wuxia correctly. I'll be slowing down a bit since I got my COVID vaccines and can finally go back to weightlifting at the gym next week. I actually sent this paragraph, the bit about Mandarin Companion, to Jared Turner, who works with John Paston. They are the creators of Mandarin Companion. I actually did a podcast a couple of weeks back, and it's just been released. So go ahead and go to the You Can Learn Chinese podcast and skip to, I think it's episode 55 or 155. I really should do more homework before recording these podcasts, shouldn't I? But anyway, something 55. And I'm 37 minutes in. That's when I start. And it was really fun. And thanks to both of those guys for letting me on there. Phil also did an interview, I think about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago now. And we're huge supporters of Mandarin Companion. In fact, we were supposed to do this a while back, but we've had such a backlog of things that we wanted to add to the course and developments to make, corrections, things like this. We haven't quite got around to it, but we are in the process of adding Mandarin Companion or excerpts of Mandarin Companion books to our own content. So I think we license like 10% overall of each book. Just like a nice sort of snippet to put in there. And it's really nice to hear that after only 2 months, starting from zero, she can read one of the Mandarin Companion books. And they're great books. So I highly recommend those people. And go and check out the podcast as well. She says, I did make a change that I think helped manage my levels of frustration and greatly increased my ability to pick up spoken words. I copied the audio from the sentences to the front of the card and tried to read along silently with the speaker, mashing R, which is repeat the audio in Anki, over and over again. I had this theory that beginners don't have a decent enough inner reading voice, since we haven't been exposed to enough spoken Mandarin. Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. I noticed it was way more difficult to read by myself slowly than reading along faster with the speaker. I bring this up because I read a recent blog post email. This is our newsletter we put out every week, which was last week happened to be Christine's interview, a long-term member, and who's just absolutely smashing the course. She's worked her way well through the course now into the intermediate, I believe. It was called Pro Users Pro Tips. So check that out on YouTube, and of course our podcast from mandarinblueprint.com/podcast. By a woman that loves Chinese, that's Christine, Chinese TV, but admitted that she can't pick up any spoken words. I think she was at level 13 at the time. I'm obviously way far from fluent, but there are a surprising amount of words I hear, And I think it's because I've been doing so much listening along with the sentences. I started doing this way since I work very busy 10-hour shifts on the weekends, hospital pharmacist, absolutely no time for Anki at work, and Anki reviews are due when they are due. I had to make a choice of slowing down on the learning, new content, or speeding up my reading. That's really interesting. And that is another thing that we're in the process of doing is sort of developing the Anki decks, the flashcard decks, to make it a bit more focused around listening. Again, it's on the list, it's in progress, should be out pretty soon. Anyway, I'm just so happy with this program. I really hope you guys make more content in the future. I started making my own cards for words not in your decks. I don't think I've ever heard ni hao used in the shows I'm watching, but wang ji, I believe that is, I'm not sure, lian and gongzi show up all the time. Haha, yes, I imagine you watch a lot of those sort of, if they're the ones that I think that those sort of set in ancient China kind of shows about the emperor and all that sort of stuff. Those are incredibly popular and they're good, that you get really into them. But I would say they're among some of the toughest to follow, because they use rather, as you've just listed there, quite high level, sort of largely old Chinese, also quite kind of obsolete, not used in modern day Chinese. But still worth learning, of course, to understand the show better and enjoy it more. I know vocab can get specialized, i.e. historical fiction, modern business terms, internet slang, etc. But it's convenient to have the radicals or props broken down, have nice sentences to go along with the new words. Thanks, Tofu Meow. That's a great email and some very useful feedback that we only get from having such a relatively close relationship with you guys. So it's a great advantage we have over other companies trying to teach Chinese, I think, or any language. So awesome. The next one is Gavia Arctica by email again. Another great email. She says, "Hi Luke and Phil, I just wanted to wish you a happy new year and thank you for this first about half a year with you. Very much looking forward to a new year with MB and curious to see where it takes me. How much Chinese I will know by the next Chinese New Year's Eve. Well, judging by your current speed, I'd say it'd be a lot. It's actually very exciting to think about it that way. That's brilliant. The new shirt looks good. Thank you. That's great. A very professional brand building look. A special thank you for explaining the meaning of Tao. This was last episode. It was very helpful to see its meaning through the words where it is used. I would be very happy to see this kind of explanation and word examples for other characters as well in the podcast every now and then. Do you know what? This is one of my favorite things to do. And you probably heard Phil and myself in, I'd say about 5 or so episodes ago, we both introduced the idea of You Lao Shi, and our favorite professor from when we were in university, in Sichuan University. He's actually going to become part of the course. That's actually not in production yet because he's just so busy, but it's on the list and it's hopefully going to become a reality at some point. The reason why I mention him is because that's what he used to do all the time. And that's how he would get us not only explain how characters and words work very well, but also to get us more interested in learning more, like you're interested. And that's kind of, I think, where Phil got that habit from, because I explained Tao, but I'd seen a video of Phil explain it to someone else, and I was sort of regurgitating that. And that's something that I want Yolasha to do, but I would also love to do ourselves as well if he's ends up not being available for some reason, because it's just so interesting and so useful. Take a character and say, this character is used in all these different words. It seems like this character has 3 or 4 or even 5 or 10 different definitions that seem very different, but actually there's a lot in common with these different definitions. Except when it comes to characters like mian. I really don't get that one. There's like mian, as it means noodles, it means face, it means side. Well, that kind of makes sense. But there must be some sort of connection there. And it's interesting to find that out, I suppose. I know that with time, all that will just come but with reading and listening, but it still feels like the moment when I'll be able to read real books is so far away in the future. Well, it depends what kind of book, right? So when I was pre-reading this just before the podcast, just double checking everything, I immediately thought of my first time reading a real book in Chinese, which was, well, it wasn't a physical book, but it was the digital version in lingq.com, which, as you know, is something I always recommend. I personally really like, and Phil likes a lot as well. And it was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory with audio and text, and it was a very simply written book, written in a very simple way. It almost felt like a graded reader, but I think it was a real Chinese book. But it's aimed at children and young adults, that sort of thing. So that was just a pleasure to read, and I wasn't at a high level at that time really. I was sort of like intermediate, upper intermediate, and I couldn't make my way through that book. So, but if I wanted to pick up 西游记, the 西游记, what is 西游记? With the Monkey King and stuff, that story. What's the English name for that story? The Monkey King. And that would be difficult for me even now, I believe. It's written that old Chinese style. Or maybe there's like those four sort of Chinese classics that always come in fours. One of them is 西游记, and there's like 红楼梦 and all this stuff. So, it depends what you pick up. So just bear that in mind. Real books are not as far away as you might think. So that kind of explanation gives a much better feel for the meaning of the character right from the start. Thank you. Yeah, and I wish it would be great if, maybe one day we have the time to not just say, okay, this character, learn this character with this movie. We actually have a video, not just tells you how to learn the character, but a video that goes into detail about every character, what words it's used in, and things like that. But we're not quite ready for that yet. As I seem to be in a feedback mode, one more thing. Someone mentioned that you should sometimes speak Chinese together on the podcast. I think it is a good idea to make some videos, even just short ones of you guys together, or just one of you interacting in Chinese with Chinese people. There is something very powerful in seeing and hearing that, so it can help people believe that learning Chinese is possible. Again, there's a lot of 默契 between us right now. 默契, which basically means rapport, I suppose. Basically, we're thinking the same thing. Because I've wanted to do more of these for a long time. If you ask Phil, I said this stuff is not only the best promotional material. Well, I guess it's for the same reason really. It's great promotional material because people look at it and say, I can do that. That's possible. And that one video that most of you have probably seen of me on the bench speaking Chinese that I just knocked out, I think that had a great impression on a lot of people. And because, like I say to you guys, like Phil and I both say, once you reach fluency, it's just normality. Maybe you don't realize if other people hear it, how much inspiration that can give them, right? So I definitely want to do that. I definitely want that to be as a type of content that we do soon. And we're both in China. Sometimes I feel a bit silly, I've got a green screen and stuff, whereas I'm literally in Berley right now, which is just this beautiful place with blue skies, mountains, snow-capped mountains at the moment, a beautiful lake, and of course Chinese people everywhere to interact with. I think, well, couldn't I just go out and do some stuff? But it's just time. It's always time, and because it's just more of a cool idea, it's not quite a plan, a 计划 yet. As in like, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is a course that we're going to create from it. This is how much we're going to sell it for, etc. There's not like a plan in place, like a business plan. I can't just go out for hours and hours and start shooting and then editing. And it's a very time-consuming process with mainly just the two of us, right? So, but yes, I want to do that more. And it wouldn't take much, right? It doesn't have to be like a big deal, right? It could just be me or Phil just chatting with a shop owner. I go to the shop, occasionally. So I will definitely consider it, doing that soon, like making some more YouTube videos or something with me just saying something in Chinese or interacting with Chinese people, having a chat. So yeah, great point. She goes on, she says, not because you need any more credibility or need to prove that you can speak Chinese, not at all. You are very credible to anyone that knows anything about the course. You clearly know what you do and do it well. Thank you. It's just that we never hear or see normal Western people speaking Chinese. Yes, there are some YouTubers that make videos based solely on that, but somehow I don't find that identifiable. That is the word. Yes, I completely get what you're saying. That point of those videos is to present that as something that is an exception, not something anyone can do. I just think that hearing you speak with Chinese people would have a big effect on people, maybe mostly unconscious even. But it would still be effective, maybe even more effective than other sales arguments you have. Speaking Chinese between the two of you on the podcast, though, I think that would just seem unnatural. The point of learning Chinese is to be able to communicate with Chinese people. I completely agree. I personally, I really hate speaking. I would never speak Chinese to another foreigner unnecessarily. There are these cool moments where I've met Ukrainians in China. Their English is really bad, but their Chinese is really good, and we end up speaking Chinese with each other. That's the best way for us to communicate. But if it's not necessary, I find it very, I don't know the word for it. I guess unnatural is a nice word for it. It kind of shabby. It's kind of, you guys could look at what that word is. So I never do that. I never speak to other foreigners in Chinese unnecessarily, but I would love to focus on speaking more Chinese and putting that out there for you guys. So awesome. I'm just fascinated by finding out what needs to happen in the mind of a person, mine to begin with, to get that click that makes you first believe that you can do this and then go do it. Learn Chinese. Actually, I remember Chad in our interview with Chad Wrestler, one of our early adopters, and he said that's what caught him was that bench video. And he's like, this guy knows what he's doing. I think I could do that now. And that's exactly what he said. It cannot happen any other way. First, you need to believe it is possible, for sure. Much of my learning journey is about trying to observe how that happens to find ways to make it happen more. And hearing Luke teach pronunciation was definitely one of those moments for me. Listening to the case studies, it seems to have impressed many of your clients. But I don't know what kind of content there should be in those Hear Luke and Phil Speak Chinese videos. And of course, those kinds of videos are much more time consuming to make. I still think about the number of people who tell you how impressed they were by that one video of Luke speaking in Chinese. That sells. I have a small company of my own. This kind of thinking comes as second nature. I don't need to see it. You've got me convinced, just hoping many other people will find you too. Well, that's just lovely. Okay, enough feedback for now. I'll go shadow for a while. I was always, throughout this whole thing, I was expecting a but. There's this one thing that's really annoying me, but there was just all positive stuff. That's great. I'll go shadow for a while. Still waiting for that click that would make me believe I can pronounce Chinese. Enjoy the holidays if you get any. Thank you very much, Gavia. So there's a couple of things just on the last points there that you mentioned. What sort of content? Well, I think I was thinking I've written a script for one that I just haven't got around to making, which is what is fluency, but just basically making any video that we'd normally make about theory, like how to go about learning Chinese as a foreigner, but just say it in Chinese. I always thought that was quite a good idea. I don't need to teach Chinese in Chinese, because if it's all in Chinese, then the only people that would understand it are people that know Chinese anyway, and therefore they don't need to learn Chinese. So I think speaking in Chinese about how to learn Chinese would be the best sort of content. You guys got any more ideas? Let me know. Give me some points. I'll make a video out of it. It doesn't have to be long, right? It's going to be like a minute or two. And I could knock that out in my back garden. What else here? I thought there was one more thing that I wanted to touch on. Yeah, you're waiting for the click that would make me believe I can pronounce Chinese. That's an interesting way of phrasing it. Yeah, I guess what you need is not just practice, which you know already, Gavia. You need to go and practice more and keep working your way through the course, keep shadowing. But you need feedback, like you just gave me. You need a native speaker to chat to. Pay for an italki session. I would recommend that's the easiest and most reliable way. Find someone to do that and just have a chat and ask for feedback maybe a couple of lessons in after you've sort of got to warm up. Because again, I've mentioned this before, but the quality of how you speak and your pronunciation is highly changeable depending on how you feel, who you're talking to, what pressure emotionally or psychologically you're under, all these sorts of things. So maybe give it a few sessions and then get some real feedback. The next one here is from Michael, who says, "Excellent, thanks, Luke. It's funny, but seeing that old page come up is like coming home." So this was Michael. I'd accidentally removed the old foundation, the legacy foundation, from the lifetime members, and immediately, almost, Michael got back. So where's the legacy course? I just got rid of it. I didn't think I tried to get rid of it for new lifetime purchases because it's just not necessary. It's just confusing. But I couldn't. It took it away from everyone else as well that already has it. And I was like, what's going on? So anyway, I gave it back. I added it back, and he says, "I'm enjoying the psychological aspect of this kind of learning as much as learning the Chinese language." The funny thing is that I've now got hundreds of stories. What he means by stories is movie scenes, basically, how we teach you. Using memory palace movie scenes, like people and actions and objects sort of interacting to memorize Chinese characters. So I've got hundreds of stories running around my mind that bring up some great memories of people and places that I've known. Yes, it's kind of autobiographical in a way. We've even had lots of very sweet, like sort of stories of people saying that they can reconnect to lost loved ones and things like that. We're having their mother and father in their mind forever, like helping them learn a new language. It's beautiful. Plus the Mandarin Blueprint Method community, or just MB community, has gone on this journey accompanied by you and Phil, and we've been there through each step of your development. Each video is not just a lesson, but also a few minutes that I can spend with friends. It's very sweet. Who would have thought that this method of learning could be such a powerful medium? I'm drawing on the MB experience for my own online project, an investment portal that enables users to invest and design their investment portfolio in accordance with their own ethics and values. The portal should go live in the next couple of weeks, and I'm hoping to market it via blogs that are chatty discussions a la Luke and Phil about ethics and socially responsible investing. And then there was just another paragraph there that was just sort of specific to something. You guys wouldn't find it interesting, but that was just really nice. And he said "Gong xi fa cai" at the end, so wishing me to get rich. This is what Chinese people say to each other during New Year, during this period of time. So yeah, that the social aspect has been far more sort of it's had a far larger effect, more profound effect than we thought. It was just something we naturally did. So we need a community. We need people to interact with each other, because we personally didn't see that very much whilst we were learning, and that would have really helped. All these fantastic resources that I often mention, they do have forums and stuff, but they're very rarely woven sort of directly into the creators, like with the creators. Like, therefore, it's more like you have teachers rather than coaches, if you know what I mean. So they're not standing with you, pushing you up the mountain. They're sort of at the top already, going, "Come up here." Whereas that's what I think that this has naturally turned into, and I hope we can keep this going as long, for the length of our business, which is we're always with you guys, giving you direct feedback, like kind of what I'm doing now. I think that's really important, not just with each other, but with the coaches too. So thank you for that, Michael. And next is Ted from the community. He says, "I'm not talking to people yet, but I speak alone. Along with things I hear. I keep stumbling over 漂亮." Well, that's a tough one. Yeah, that could be a tough one. I simply cannot say it. I can say 漂 or 亮 alone, but the combination throws me. Any suggestions? And I gave Ted the same suggestion that I give to everyone who's having trouble with any pronunciation. When it's this kind of trouble, when it's like you actually, you get how to say the sounds, you just can't say it in quick enough, essentially. The only thing you can do, the best thing you can do, is to first of all remember that your mouth muscles, your cheek, your jaw, your tongue especially, and your lips, they're not used to Chinese. And Chinese pronunciation has some parts that are just not in English. So it's like, I don't know, I wouldn't say, it's just like going and learning yoga. You can't do, I don't know what yoga people do, but like, I'm just thinking in terms of stretching, developing your muscles. Let's do boxing, right? You can't do like a jab perfectly you need to develop that muscle memory over time. With yoga, you can't do, I don't know, the downward dog or whatever perfectly. You need to wait until your muscles have stretched enough so you can do it properly. And it's the same thing with speaking and pronunciation this way. I had exactly the same problem. Do you know what I did? I focused and I'd say out loud, as you're doing, Ted, over and over again, as much as I could, 漂亮, 漂亮. I would slow it down. This is basically step 1, slow the speed down until you say it right. And then step 2, say it faster and faster gradually, because as your muscles develop at those speeds. So it's like 漂亮, 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 and you can sort of say it. I had the same problem with we often call this tongue acrobatics, where you do retroflex, ZHCH or whatever, and then you say the JQX, GCC. GCC, your tongue is down here behind the teeth. Your tongue is right, so not right up, but it's up, right? More than English for sh, for that sound. So you're going, when you say something like 这件事情, 这件事情, I can say that really fast now, but before I could not say it. 这件事情, basically it means this thing in Chinese. 这件事情, 这件事情. Right, so you're, okay, after I say it like 5 times, I can't do it anymore, but because my tongue gets tired, because it's a muscle, right? But it just takes practice. It took a lot of practice. Or 出去, 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 tongue up, tongue down, 出去, 出去. So it's very difficult. And that's the only thing you can do. Well, another thing you can do as well, another thing that I realized was in the early days that I was overly doing the I was sort of like choking myself with my own tongue, basically. So I was like, 这件事情. I was really over the top with my pronunciation, and I realized over time and input and listening to real speakers that the real speakers don't go to that much effort. Just like we don't, in English, we don't say, I don't know. We say, I don't know, because we can't be bothered to move our mouth with such a common expression. So, 这件事情. It's like quick and it's subtle, like, and it's not, the tongue is not so far up or so far down. You sort of, that's another thing you get used to with over time. So yes, that should be enough to go on. And that pretty much works for any of you if you're having problems with any pronunciation, word, a phrase. You just need to say it more. Oh, but another last little tip as well, have a glass of water with you, because sometimes just your mouth is a bit dry. That's a big difference as well. Next is Kevin Roy. Kevin on the community. He's been with us for a long time, Kevin. I remember seeing his image on there. He gave us a lovely review like a year ago or more. But he finally got around to saying hi in the community, which is great. He says, hello everyone. I promised Luke and Phil I would write an introduction, and a mere 10 months after starting the pronunciation course, I finally got around to it. Better late than never. I was born in the UK, but I now live in Blenheim, New Zealand. I work in aviation and my office is based in the capital, Wellington. So I stay in a studio flat near the city centre during the week and pop back to South Island, normally on a ferry across the Cook Strait at the weekends. I left school at 16, having pretty much hated every second of it, where I failed miserably to get on with French and pretty much every other academic subject. Me too. I wouldn't say I failed. I got like A's and B's and stuff. I went to a good school, that stuff. But I certainly hated it, and I did very, very badly all before my exams because I just didn't care. And yes, it's not your fault. That's school's fault. But you already know that. However, when life took me to other parts of the world, Germany with the army, Poland with a training job, I didn't have a great deal of difficulty absorbing enough language to get by. Yeah, it's because you're not dumb and you're not bad at languages. School just made you think that you were. This might not seem important, but this experience combined with a distrust. And by the way, I just want to say that that's one of the biggest motivations for Phil and I to keep going with this, with Mandarin Blueprint every single day, is that the travesty that is traditional learning, traditional teaching, especially when it comes to languages, and like the impression that leaves on people, the impression that it left on us. I was like, I'm terrible at this. I feel so dumb. I feel so bad at this thing. I'm going to give up and do something else. Millions of people feel like that, and they shouldn't. They don't need to. And it's kind of frustrating for us. So that's one of the things that keeps us going. It might not seem important, but this experience combined with a distrust of the usefulness of formal education encouraged me to look very positively upon the Mandarin Blueprint approach. And that's why almost 100% of our members are people that have tried, I'd say maybe 80-90% of people that have tried learning Chinese and failed. I had no specific reason to learn Mandarin. I was intrigued by the advert for the pronunciation course on Facebook during the lockdown for COVID-19 and took a chance. I looked at it as getting something positive out of what the enforced time working from home. I find Mandarin a fascinating language, and although in the short term that being dependent on when the New Zealand borders open again, I will be using my Mandarin on holiday. I'm thinking of this as more of a hobby. Yeah. I'm in no rush to get through the course. I tend to do just a couple of lessons a day, and I'm not worried about having to go back and do lessons again. My one virtue is that I do my lessons and Anki every day. I believe persistence pays off. Well, that's pretty much one of our key principles is consistency. Never have a 0 day. We do not care if you spend 5 minutes a day or 6 hours a day, and we have members that do both. The most important thing is persistence, and eventually, when maybe if your life changes in some way, then you'll end up investing more time later on. But if you don't, it doesn't matter. It's all good. So thank you very much for that, Kevin. Nice to finally hear from you. Christopher on level 10 complete says, so excited to reach this level. Imagine studying Chinese without a roadmap or blueprint. I started a month ago and do only 3 or 4 characters a day. Hands and moving method is now second nature. I always like seeing this kind of feedback from people that have only made it to, haven't made it past level 13 yet, because that's when things really start to get interesting, when you start reading stuff, whereas like a few weeks or months before you didn't even know pinyin. It's just it's a very cool feeling. So thanks for that, Christopher. Roland Kofler on the Living Links Logic of Chinese Word Learning. This is you can check this video out on YouTube. It's called something Living Links in the title. Living Links is how we hack Chinese vocabulary. So we teach you a series of mnemonic techniques for learning compound words. Learning individual characters, that's a different ball game. That's the hands and moving method, which Christopher just mentioned. So Roland just says, wow, this funny, high-spirited text really cheered me up. More. Yeah, that was, I believe, Phil. He's very good at writing that sort of, really super, I just call it super American, just like, you can do it, but really funny and silly. He can write like that really well. So he does a lot of the descriptions in the lessons in the actual course itself. So I'm glad that cheered you up. I imagine you're struggling a little bit at this time because you're not too far in the course, and sometimes it can be like overwhelming learning all this stuff and not knowing if you've quite got it down yet. And then we come in and Phil comes in and makes you laugh a little bit. That's great to see. Next is Christine on Vocab Unlocked from Jie, which essentially means to tie. She says, I don't quite understand the function of 起来, 才 in the following sentence. Well, first of all, before we get into the sentence, 起来 and 才 are separate. And this is a very common difficulty that beginners or new intermediate learners face, which is where the heck does one word begin and one word end? Because there's no spaces between anything in Chinese, any words, unless you have except for like a full stop or a comma. And it just takes time building your vocabulary and character set before you can start to differentiate. So 起来才 is not a single word, it's 起来才. So let's look at the sentence and we'll break it down a little bit. 把大家的想法结合起来才是最好的. So 把大家的想法, so take everybody's ideas, 想法结合起来, that's the next sort of chunk. 结合, which means to combine. 起来 means become, right, in this context. 结合起来, to become combined. 才是, so 才 means is the only, and then whatever follows. So 才是最好的, so is the best way. So doesn't literally, if you were going to translate this into the English, you would just say the best way is to take everybody's idea and combine them together. Everybody's ideas, or taking everybody's ideas and combining them together, making them forming them into one, is the best, or is the best way, or whatever. And that cai is basically saying there's no other way. Like, that is no other best way. That this is the best way. So that cai that's what that's saying. It's only, essentially. It gives that feeling. But I thought I'd take this opportunity to look into 起来. Because 起来, as in just both of them are fifth tone. Right, so there's 起来, which means rise up. 起来, which you'd hear in, like, I believe Mao Zedong is like a song about, not Mao Zedong, sorry. It's a Chinese national anthem, I believe. So I really should look this stuff up. But it's 起来, 起来, like, it's like rise up, basically. Rise, you know. Anyway, so that's like got the tones. That's got third tone, second tone, like to rise up, the verb. But when it's double fifth tone, 起来, 起来, so it's a 结合起来, then it has several key meanings. I thought I'd just give a couple of example sentences because this would be quite a cool little lesson for you. So I just literally copied and pasted this whole section from Pleco, just copied it straight into the notes, just, you know, picked and chose my favorite sentences for each one. So there are five major usages of this. So the number one is to move upwards, up. So for example, 拿起来. So you're picking something up, 拿起来. So literally moving up. Or 病人能坐起来吗？坐起来. So literally sitting up. Can the patient sit up? So that's the most straightforward one, right? And the second one was to start to become. So 热起来了. It's getting hot. 热起来. And this is the 结起来, 结合起来. This is the one from the sentence above, I believe. So to become one, basically 结合起来, to become combined. And another example is 他胖起来了. 胖起来了. She's starting to getting fat. He's getting fat. And there's another one indicating completeness or effectiveness. 存起来. Store away. So 存起来. Done. You know, everything's saved, everything's stored away. 加起来. Add up. 加起来. This is all like sort of that completeness. Or 锁起来. Lock up. And there's a fourth one here, when one comes to. I didn't quite get this, like English translation, but the example sentences, as usual, make it very clear. 看起来要下雨. So 看起来, 听起来. So really, I think that this is the main way it's used, in 看起来, as in it looks like. 听起来, sounds like. Looks like rain. 看起来要下雨. Looks like rain. And 听起来颇有道理. Or just, you don't have to have the 颇 in there. 颇 is just a very formal way of saying rather or quite. You say 听起来有道理. So it sounds like you've got a point. It sounds quite reasonable. And the last one here, I really didn't get this English translation at all. But it's they tried their best to explain something very complicated and abstract. It said forming a verbal topic. So basically, 说起来容易, 做起来难. To say is easy, to do is difficult. Or literally, easier said than done. That's how the Chinese say that phrase. So there you go. Those are the 5 ways that 起来 is used. Just remember, it's double fifth tone. That was even surprising for me to read. I was like, double fifth? Yeah, it is. You know, it's one of those things that you know instinctively or subconsciously, but you don't realize until you actually see it in black and white, consciously. So I hope that helped there, Christine, and anyone else listening. Let's move on to the next question here. Thomas Brand on Tian. This is a really simple question I thought that some of you would benefit from. He says, when reviewing the flashcard for 我 blank, 天做有氧运动. So 做有氧运动. So I believe that's 有氧, so it's aerobic exercise, like running. I imagine that means. I always get confused which one's which. So yeah, he said 每天 instead of 天天, but so the answer was 天天, but he said 每天. Is there a difference in meaning between the two? And the answer is no. 每天 and 天天 both mean every day, but 天天 is just a more formal, much less common way of saying it. So if I was you, I would mark myself as 100% correct on that. That's absolutely fine. Maybe put a note in the card, some sort of reminder which one it is for next time. makes it slightly more formal. The next one is Gavia on 改天. Just wondering, does 改天, literally that means change day. Does that really mean you're going to do something another day, another time, or does it have the same kind of sound to it as we really should do lunch sometime, where you actually mean it? Like, how are you? But I actually mean, how are you? You don't have any real intention to meet that person. This is a good question. So here's a couple of example sentences, because again, everything just becomes way clearer rather than me trying to explain it, right? Everything's way clearer, just look at an example sentence or two. So here's the first one. 今天时间太紧，改天我们再聊. So 今天, today is too busy. That's a really cool phrase, by the way. 时间太紧, 紧 literally means tight. So that's just an interesting phrase that you could use. 改天我们再聊. Or you could just say 改天再聊. Right, so again, speak. So 改天 means literally change the day, but it's used in the way of saying another day or some other day or someday. Okay, here's another one, 改天再来, or the third one, 行, which means sure, possible. 改天吧. I would say, to answer your question, I would say it's more like that sort of, like let's do it some other day. It's not very serious, but there may be certain contexts where you could say it in a certain way, perhaps, that makes it like, 我们改天. Yeah, no, it wouldn't be really, because 改天再约is like, making this sort of thing. 改天再来, it literally is just like a brush off. It's kind of like, but in a polite way. It does show intention to do it, but it's not like, let's get our notebooks out and book a time right now, So highly useful, very polite as well, and it does actually, it's meaningful. It does come across as, I want to do this. But at the same time, you have the luxury of not being serious about it as well at the same time. So it's a very cool phrase to know. Next one is Jason Pon on 改. So it's a similar sort of area in the course. Here's a sentence that he was talking about. 就是改了自己不好的地方. 改自己不好的地方. So changing the parts of you or things about you that are not good. 改them, right? Same character in 改天. And he says, is this a sentence a figure of speech or something? 地方translate to things? Well, not really. I mean, it's 地方, I guess the best literal translation would be part, right? So 地方, your most common thing you know is for place. 这是什么地方? 这是什么地方? Sometimes Chinese people say 地方, like with the first time, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they say 地方. I don't actually know why or what that's about, but I just heard that. But say 地方with the fifth time, I guess, mostly. And he says, so that would be the most common way. That what place is this? What kind of place is it? 这是什么样的地方? But it's also used to mean just generally part of something, or like part of you, part of your personality, part of something you said. So again, do you know what we're going to do? We're going to look at a couple of example sentences. 有不明白的地方吗? Do you have any not understanding parts? Is there any parts that you don't understand, essentially? Or 关注, like to focus. 关注哪些地方? 关注哪些地方? Where should we focus? 哪些, or literally 哪些地方 or 哪些地方, which means which parts, which places. So it's quite subtle, but I understood why that confused you. Here's another one from Jason, just a very quick one. Again, I thought you'd benefit from listening to. Is this following sentence, which is 我数了数有几只狗. So that says 数了数, like to 数 something is to count. So you could just say 我数了, like I count it with a third tone. If you say it with a fourth tone, this character means number, 数. 你说个数吧. That's another cool way of saying, give me the price. 说个数, like say a number. Basically, it's like a cool way of saying. Although I don't recommend you use that. You might come across sound a bit weird if you're just like in a market. 说个数. It's like, what are you, a gangster or something? Or what's this like high-level businessman doing in a market? So you could just say 我数了有几只狗. So I counted how many dogs there were. But in this case, it's saying 我数了数有几只狗. So Jason very reasonably asks, is this 数了数 used to achieve a change in tone or expression? And the answer is yes. Your instinct is correct. It is just make it like, I counted it up. I had a little. It makes it more chilled, basically. Whenever you see that, it has a very similar, exactly the same effect as the following two examples. So I could say 数一数, 数一数, or 数一下. All right, so both of these, all three of these. So this is 数了数 is basically a past tense version of 数一数 or 数一下, which are usually used in the present or future. 我数一下. So it's basically I'm about to count, right? So I feel like I explained that okay. I don't know if I was sort of semi-rambling there, but it's just a cool little tidbit of information for you guys. 数了数 or 数. And of course you can pretty much insert any verb, in there. As long as it's a single character verb. So the next one here is from Al, who says, for another sentence from our course, he says, 不用我说, no need for me to say anything, 他自己就明白了. He understood all on his own. He says, I cannot work out what 就 adds to the overall message. 就, by the way, is a very subtle character in and it's quite slippery. It has several meanings. That's why it has so many meanings if you look it up in dictionary, because it's a very subtle character with tons of similar meanings depending on the context. So it's completely understandable. He says, does it make it more explicit that he understood right away, or would 不用我说,他自己明白了 just sound grammatically wrong? And again, this is an example of your instinct being correct. That means you've been doing the course really well. Same with Jason earlier. Often his instinct is right. It's just he wants to double check. It is. Yes, it's exactly what it does. So both of them are fine. 他自己明白了, right? That's fine. 他自己就明白了. It's like, and by the way, I'd like to point out that this is something I should have said earlier. So I know lots of by the ways today. But I was talking earlier about sounds that are tough for you. I can't remember who was it saying 漂亮, right? I believe it was Roland. He said 漂亮, right? He said he finds it difficult to say. 自己 is one that's bothered me since day one, and it's tough for me. Even now, to say 自己, 自己. I can say it when I put effort into it, but I'm just saying stuff. And I thought it was really funny as I was going through these notes, because there's so many examples of 自己 used in other questions. This being one of them, of course, the main culprit. So thanks a lot, Al. You're bringing out my weak points here. So 不用我说,他自己明白了. There you go. Slow it down. There you go. See? And how would 不用我说,他明白了 come across by comparison? Well, you're absolutely right. It's just the only difference would be adding a 就 would be like, got it. He got it exactly, like adds sort of a bit of speed. It's saying he got it quickly, and maybe even a slight bit of surprise as well. 就明白了. He just got it. Like, it's just, imagine saying like that in English. He just got it. So it often 就 is that sort of just used in that way. So it's that word just, and it gives that kind of meaning. Just another quick one, the quick reminder. Of course, we've mentioned this many times in the podcast. We actually have a lesson about this in the course, a grammar lesson, and on our YouTube video. It's about le, which can really confuse people in the early days. Tara says in the sentence, 我写了几页了. Literally, I have written a few pages. What's the point of the second le, she asks. And the only point is very simple, actually. Two le's means it's still a progress. It's still in progress. So she's still writing, and so far she's written a few pages, or he. So that's it. So now, again, this is I think it's a useful part about explaining grammar. Tara, if she didn't have a teacher or anyone to point that out to her or help her out with that, she would eventually figure it out. But it might take another few months of like, what is this? So it's a very simple difference. You'll see it everywhere now. It's a common thing that happens once you realize something new. You learn something new about the grammar or the characters in the language, or you learn a new word or how to use a new word. You'll just end up seeing it everywhere. It's some weird phenomenon that happens. And next is Simon on a grammar lesson again for Jie, that same character. This is great because this is some positive feedback on our idea of renaming the grammatical terms to something a little bit more clear and straightforward, in our opinion. So, saying things like relators or helpers to make the grammar functions easier to understand. He says, Simon says, just to give another perspective, I'm a native speaker and have taught IELTS. I'm a fan of the new terms. Nothing is perfect, but I feel these work better for me as I never liked the traditional grammar terms. This is actually, something that I was a little bit unsure about. It was Phil's idea to do this. And I was like, I don't know if people get this idea. It's kind of it's a cool innovation. I really like the idea, but I was like, I'm not sure if people will like it. We've had one comment from someone recently who's like, I just don't get that. I just don't get what you're doing, and it confuses me and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, oh no, did we make a mistake with that? But it's really good to hear Simon come back, and we've had a couple of other comments also come back saying, no, I like them. I think it's a great idea, and so it's really good to hear. Because obviously that's sort of really woven into the curriculum at this point. Thank you very much for that, Simon. Roland Kofler again on the initials. I had to put this in because this is an important one to reply to. He says, wow, the International Phonetic Annotation really helps to understand what is going on. Yes, that's great. That said, it remains a mystery. I fear J and Q, ZH, CH, C and Z, these are called minimal pairs, sounds that sound the same. I fear these combinations need the gift of absolute pitch. If you are like me and haven't developed this gift, you will never get it. Well, that is absolute nonsense. Sorry, Roland, but I just don't believe that. I've had students that couldn't pronounce certain things, just having incredible difficulty. But they could, and they'll never, ever, ever sound anything like native speakers, and no matter how much they try, because it's just. But eventually, with enough practice and good coaching, they sound accurate. They sound like sounds that is how they should sound. A native speaker can understand them at least, but they'll always have an accent or whatever. But saying that you'll never develop them because it's impossible, you never get it, this is not the right attitude, and it's not true. It's not true. If it was true, I wouldn't say anything, I wouldn't bother trying to say this. But I just don't believe that's the case. We've had personal clients that we used to do one-to-one training with that just seemed hopeless. It just seemed like you're never going to be able to say this, or you're never going to be able to understand this, and eventually they do because they keep trying. And again, that attitude it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy is what we say in English, self-fulfilling prophecy, you'll make it a reality by saying that. So stay positive and positive things will happen. Next is Andreas Lienemann on level 26. So yeah, basically someone had commented, I think it was Jason Pond again, who was like, I just realized I wasn't getting these emails. So we send out emails to you after you hit mark complete at the end of each level. And there's 57 levels and there's 57 emails, all written with Phil's funny sort of punchy style. And if you don't hit mark complete, they don't get sent. And a lot of people also have marketing turned off, like they don't want to see marketing emails and stuff. Fair enough. But that also means we can't send you emails as well. But no worries, because all the text is in the description of the lesson. It's just nice to also receive an email. So if you guys are on the course, make sure you hit that mark complete. Make sure you have your notifications turned on. We don't actually send you any marketing messages through the platform anyway. So don't worry, you won't get a bunch of sales messages or something like that if you turn it on. So just a little point there for people already on the course. Next, and I guess the final just general comment of this week is from Nacho, and he says, well, I just thought I'd put this in the end, for new vocab unlocked for la肚子, which means diarrhea in Chinese. And of course, when we ask you to learn words, we recommend you choose an image for them to keep them in your mind. Although I don't think you have any trouble with la肚子. I think the image of la肚子is pretty clear. So you need to go to that trouble. But Nacho is, a dedicated member, so he's going to go and do that. And he says, some words, I do really get nervous when I'm looking up images of them on the internet. You don't know what's going to appear. Yes, I remember creating and reviewing certain cards. Because I used to work, study in a coffee shop or whatever. I remember just hiding in the corner, sometimes just in case something untoward sort of popped up on my screen, someone saw it. So yeah, that's another hint for everyone. Just watch out with certain words. Make sure you have the safe search turned on as well. Now we're going to move on to a new section of the podcast, which is called Living Links. As you know, as I've mentioned a couple of times today, people sending in their ideas of connections, some sort of living link, which basically means a personal mnemonic based on, well, every mnemonic is personal. Let's just say this, living links are our Mandarin Blueprint word for mnemonics. So you're taking a lifeless piece of information, like 对面, this word that's coming up is largely not that meaningful to you, and you're making it more meaningful by connecting it in some way to your personal life experience. And that's what a mnemonic is. I think that'd be a good definition of a mnemonic. This one is from Robert on New Vocab Unlocked for 对. So we're looking at the word 对面, and he says, since up until now I've had more of a mental tie of mian to noodle, or the first half of bread. 面包, 面粉is related to flour. That's why it's, yeah. He says, it was helpful to remember that it also means face to face. So for 对面, as in opposite, the correct way to stand face to face is opposite each other. That's really good. So we've got 面对面, 面对面. He says, yeah, so let me just say that again. So for 对面, the correct way to stand face to face is opposite each other. Yeah, and mian just generally means face as well. So that works very well. See if you can find an image of two noodles staring at each other, or two guys eating noodles, having a noodle eating contest looking at each other. I have not pre-prepared and looked for that, but I'm sure Google has, or some other image search engine has something like that somewhere. I think that would be the perfect image to connect with this living link, this mnemonic. So give that a try. Next is Stephanie on Vocab Unlocked from 后. So this one is about the word 最后, so which means final or last. And she says, for 最后, I used the end. This is, yeah, I like that song, by Linkin Park, and the cover art works well for me too. I'm not familiar with the cover art, but that's something that you guys could search right now and add an image into your flashcards to remember this word, if you're a Linkin Park fan or if you're aware of them. That's a great. And having music playing and just reminding yourself of that music, that tune, as you're looking at this word will be a great way to cement it very quickly. Okay, really good. So the next one is from Oscar on Vocab Unlocked for 星, which is star, and specifically for the word 星期, which means week. He says, if you're like me, then you don't have anything specific that happens every week. That's a good connection. Think of something. What do you do every week? Once a week? What's your weekly thing, weekly task? Just choose that. And he says he doesn't have something that happens every week at the same time. So he just says, as such, I picked an image of star trails. It is a picture of stars that has to be taken over a period of time. Yeah, actually, that's my desktop picture on my computer, just coincidentally. Yes, if you leave a camera there for a week, and you just see the stars just moving in circles, and it has 星 has star in it. So that is just a fantastic connection there. Well done, Oscar. Next is Christopher Neale on It's a Word for Button, which means root. He says, this looks like the second character of the word for Japan. It is, 日本, where it must have the meaning of origin, as in land of the rising sun. Good to know. Do you know what's funny? I didn't think about it like that at all. I didn't make that connection. I was randomly thinking about this, this week. This is quite coincidental. I saw this. I was like, I was just sort of, I have that sort of brain. I just sort of go off and stare into the distance and just do that for like a minute or two every now and then. And I was just randomly thinking about the word 日本 in Japanese. I was like, what is that about? Sun root. I don't know what that is. Maybe I'll look that up one day. And I was like, yeah, and I forgot about the land of the rising sun. Is that the reason why it's called 日本? Maybe. It sounds like it will work. I don't know where the land of the rising sun comes from. Like, it must be, maybe it's incredibly old. So that was just really a bit of serendipity there. So thanks, Christopher. So that's all the messages about related to vocabulary. Now let's move on to the final section of the podcast, which is movies. So there's a blog post all about this in the notes. You can go and check that out, and it explains what the heck this is all about. But it's a very important part of our course called the Hansa Movie Method, where we teach you how to learn characters using movies based on people that you choose from your life and objects that you think of and places that you've lived. It's very cool. It's very fun. I should mention this as well before I jump in, which is you can start a 14-day free trial of the Mandarin Blueprint Method, and you can learn the entirety of this method, as well as 45 common characters, how to read, write, and pronounce them correctly using this method. And of course, pronunciation mastery is included in that as well. And 2 weeks, 14 days is enough time to do all those 400 lessons. Just about. So the first one here is from Rick Santos on Make a Movie for T, which I guess it would be instrument. Utensil. Utensil is the actual specific word that we've chosen here. And he says, the QI actor or actress is feeding the 4 pit bull puppies. So the Quan, third tone, right? That's the very formal character for dog. You see it more in written Chinese or like in idioms within other words. 4 pit bull puppies. She devises a rotating windmill with 4 spokes made up of 4 spoons, utensils. As the device turns, it drops a morsel of food into the 4 puppies' mouths one by one. 1, 2, 3, 4. She now calls this device a Q-tensile, since it's really kind of a utensil, a qi. Very interesting, very out there, and very sort of cryptic in certain ways, as Rick's scenes usually are. But I think that concept is the visual concept that you've built in my mind there really works for me. I really like that one. Thank you. Next one is John Nomura, Make a Movie for xiao, as in school. In the bathroom of my AO set, Cupid, jiao, it's a really good one for jiao. Jiao means like interchange or intercourse, like two things sort of doing this. And Cupid is a really good way of doing that. Cupid taps Shirley Temple, the XI actor, on the head, and instead of dreaming under a tree, which is the left side component, about a school, she's attending school like a normal kid. That's good. I imagine that you would show a good idea though is just to have some element of that. Maybe you just didn't mention it in the script here. Have some element that signifies that clearly. Like she suddenly she's wearing a school uniform. She's doing homework. She was all like sort of sloppy and careless, and now suddenly she's like,认真的学习, But other than that, really very good. Well done, John. Next is Alex on lei, as in kind or type. He says, Larry David is sorting out his food cupboard. Okay, it's got to be in the EI bathroom set, obviously, but I can live with that. Rice, me, so that is the top component. You can go to at the top there. He gets on the Big Show's. The Big Show. The Big Show. I remember from the wrestler, right? He's big. Da. That works very well as a prop. He gets on the Big Show's shoulders to put the rice away in the correct section with the rest of the non-perishables. Okay, big fella, get in. Larry pushes the Big Show into the bottom shelf with the rest of the wrestlers. Quite a squash now. A few rice grains pattering down on him, hitting Larry as he shuts the door. I love those little details. Well done, Alex. Yeah, that means you're really getting into it and you're imagining what could happen. What would really happen if Larry David was actually doing this? Well, most likely some little rice bits would fall down. So make it really get into it and act. Just let it play out and see what happens. Makes it more realistic, I suppose, which makes it more memorable. Part of this is not to make crazy scenes that are really fantastical and difficult to think of, really. You make it more realistic. Your brain accepts it more as real, and therefore it becomes more of a real memory. That's something I learned from a Dominic O'Brien book, who was a 8-time world memory champion. Next is Oscar Haglund on Make a Movie for Dong, which means to understand. He says, the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz, that's the, very good, the sort of emotion side, the heart, right? Squished to the left heart, is exercising with some dumbbells. Zhong, dumbbells are heavy. Zhong means heavy. Very good prop. In the gym as Donald Trump walks up. Donald Trump would be the D for Dong. He's very confused. Why is a man made out of tin trying to build muscles? The Tin Man whips out a rose, which is the top component, and says that he is trying to make himself look his best before trying to ask Dorothy out for a date. This makes perfect sense to Trump, who nods understandingly. If there's anything Trump understands, it is trying to get girls. Awesome. Adding a bit of personality from the actual actor into the scene as well. Maybe even making him do like a naughty look at the camera as well. Who knows? That's a great scene. Well done. And those props, by the way, I will say, Oscar, very well chosen props. So that's all we've got for this week. That's all the movies, the living links, and of course just the great comments and messages and emails that we've received from you this week. I'll be back in another couple of weeks, and in the meantime, get in touch at contact@mandarinblueprint.com or podcast@mandarinblueprint.com if you want to just share something or ask a question. We're always there. We switch off half the week. I do Wednesday to Sunday. Phil does Sunday to Wednesday or something like that. So we always get back to everyone, and we're always happy to hear from you. And in the meantime, if you've listened this far and you haven't signed up for the Mandarin Blueprint Method, then it's probably about time to do that, right? If you listened this far, go and check out a 14-day free trial on our website, mandarinblueprint.com. All right, guys, I will speak to you in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye.